Hello, everyone. Vincenzo Calla here. Welcome to episode 17 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the MPP for Don Valley East, Dr. Adil Shamji. Dr. Adil Shamji was first elected to represent Don Valley East in the 2022 provincial election. Dr. Shamji graduated from Western University and completed medical school at the University of Toronto. Since then, Dr. Shamji spent his earlier years providing healthcare on Indigenous reserves across Canada. Dr. Shamji most recently served as an emergency physician and the medical director for 11 homeless shelters in the city of Toronto. In addition to his role as a physician, Dr. Shamji worked as a faculty member in the School of Medicine at University of Toronto. He has fought at the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic and the opioid crisis. Thank you, Adil, for joining me today.
It's entirely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on, and you're the first newly elected member of provincial parliament that I'm having on the show since the election. So it's great to have you here today. And we're going to start off the first segment, which is called Adil's Story, where we'll talk about your political history. So the first question is, when did you first get involved in politics?
Truthfully, it has only been very recently since I got into politics. But when I think back, I've always been a big picture thinker. I've always thought about the big issues that are impacting people. And so, when I was in high school, I did some Model United Nations and Model Parliaments, but I had interest just across so many different areas. It wasn't until I went into clinical practice and I realized that, my patients were suffering from acute medical problems that were a reflection of bad social policy that I began to think more along the lines of policymaking and politics. So I took a sabbatical for my clinical work. I got a master's degree in public policy from the University of Oxford. And then while I was working as a frontline physician during the COVID-19 pandemic, it became apparent that despite all of the greatest efforts of physicians and healthcare workers at the front lines, it felt as though our jobs were being actively and predictably made more difficult by our government. And so that's really when the switch flipped and it became apparent to me that to have the impact that I wanted to have, I would need to put my name forward for elected office.
Well, especially I would like to say there have been multiple elections now, federal and provincial now. There's been a federal election and provincial election since the start of the pandemic. And during the election, a lot of people really did start to think about politics because they saw politics playing a role in everyday life. It's always been there, but they saw the elected officials making big decisions every day on television and working closely with different levels of parliament. And there was good stuff and there was bad stuff, and people were like yourself, who a doctor, or whether you're a doctor, a teacher, or whatever other role you had, you started to sort of think about that and see the role and see whether you liked how it was going or not liked how it's going, and put your name forward for elected office, like you said. So we're going to go into the second question, which is, why did you decide to run for the position you hold? So why did you decide to run for MPP?
Absolutely. So, I alluded to a little bit of this earlier. My patients for the last 10 years of my career have evidently been suffering from acute medical problems that are a consequence of failed social policy. I've always been driven by the desire to help people. And working in the emergency department, I have the opportunity to help, 20 or 25 people on a particularly industrious emergency department shift, where I can step forward in elected office and I can help 95,000 people in the riding of Don Valley East at a time, or 15 million people in the province of Ontario at a single time. And so part of this was about amplifying my impact. And then finally, I would say that as a physician, I have this unique privilege where my patients come to me and they share with me stories and struggles that they don't feel comfortable sharing with other people, the public at large, and certainly not with politicians. Struggles and stigma around things like mental health or addictions with opioids. And it goes across so many other policy domains. And because I have that privilege and I represent those patients, I felt compelled to step forward, to amplify their stories and fight for the struggles that they're describing to me, but for which, as a physician working only in an emergency department, I felt powerless to do anything more than slap a Band-Aid on when there are gaping wounds in our society that need to be healed.
Well, it's so true. And you mentioned mental health and the opioid crisis. Mental health is something that I've talked about a lot before on my show. And I've struggled with my share of mental health issues, and I like to speak about it because it's something so important that really, especially over the past couple of years, has really started to be brought forward into the front light of things. And it's important that we have members of parliament, members of provincial parliament, ministers, counselors, even everybody working in politics to sort of really highlight this issue and the importance of it, that mental health is health and that it's something that needs fixing sometimes.
Thanks for being an advocate on that yourself.
Thank you. And I'm sure you'll do some work on that as well on the provincial level and over the next 4 years. So we're going to go on to our next segment, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk about your community and hopes as an elected official, as a newly elected official. So the first question is, what is your favorite part about the community of Don Valley East that you're now representing as the MPP?
I mean, I'm sure every candidate that you interview will start with the same thing, which is that their riding, my riding, Don Valley East, is an incredible community. What makes it so special is its profound diversity. To me, Don Valley East is a microcosm of our society in Ontario and more broadly in Canada. In the north of the riding, we have people who come from, high income backgrounds. In the south, they are more low income. We have people who've lived, in the community for generations and others who have just arrived. We have people who are just starting their lives, and everyone comes with their hopes, dreams, wishes, and aspirations. It is a community that is cohesive, that is passionate, that is hardworking, and I really admire that. We have so many different cultures and we all cohabitate and support each other. And along the way, we have, incredibly hardworking business owners. We have, world-class institutions like the Ontario Science Centre, the Aga Khan Museum. And then above all, we have unparalleled natural beauty, just like the rest of our province and country. We have an amazing ravine ecosystem, sprawling parks. And to find all of these things in a single riding is just so special. And I would argue, I don't think that you can find it anywhere else.
Well, definitely sounds like a beautiful riding. I mean, I've been to your riding. I'm from Ottawa, but I go down to Toronto GTA area a lot, and there's lots of fantastic places. And your riding is another fantastic place. And having that diversity of different backgrounds, economic backgrounds, life stories, people who have lived in Canada for 100 years, or people who have lived here for 10 years, or 1 year, 6 months, even. That's just so important to building a strong community and serving them in various capacities. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is, what do you hope to achieve as an elected official now that you are their MPP? What do you hope to achieve just in general as an elected official?
Sure. To me, I have three goals. The first is to be the greatest champion for my community that I can. One thing that immediately became apparent to me as I put my name forward in politics was just how much cynicism there is around politicians and what government can accomplish. And I hope, by being the member of provincial parliament in Don Valley East, that I can change that perception, that I can inspire every single person in the riding to achieve their full potential, to believe in their elected representatives and to believe in their government, and to fight with every core of my being to make Don Valley East even better than it is, and to convince everyone what I know, which is that we are the best riding in the entire province. So that would be goal number one. Goal number two is to engage our youth. I firmly believe that while I serve the entire riding, we especially serve our youth, who will inherit the successes or failures of everything that we do in government. Some of our greatest challenges, like climate change and the environment, I feel have been victims over the last few years. They haven't had the attention that they needed to. And while we're obviously beginning to experience some of the consequences of not addressing these issues, things like environment and climate change as aggressively as we need to, this will only become worse as the years go on. And so I want to engage our youth and motivate them to realize the potential that they have in themselves, and to hold myself and all of government to account on the issues that are most important to them. And then finally, something that is very dear to me is I want to advance the belief that all policy is health policy. Now, as a physician, many people expect me to come forward and to advocate on healthcare system reform, which I'm prepared to do, to fight for patients, which I'm prepared to do, and to provide, an informed perspective on how we use our healthcare budget. And I intend to do that too. But the real vision that I want to bring forward is that for us to truly achieve full physical, mental, and social well-being, we need to make sure that we go beyond just health policy. We need to have good policy around housing, education, environment and climate change, around employment. Every single policy domain, when executed properly, makes us healthier individuals. And I want to encourage everyone to see health within that broader perspective so we can redouble our efforts to improve policy in every single one of these domains.
Well, three really great and important goals. And especially, I mean, I am a young person in politics. And part of my goal is sort of to get young people involved in politics as well, and just to make them pay attention into politics because it's so important. But especially on climate change, that is such a, it's great that you mentioned that. And I mean, it's something that young people think about every day, that climate change, climate policy is super important because it's our future and we have our planet and we need to continue doing what we can as young people, and you as an MPP and general governments and around the world need to keep doing it, keep doing things to make sure that there's good climate policy and we try to reverse the effects of climate change, or at least help to sort of make our planet a better, cleaner place for the long term, for our generation and for generations to come.
We have to.
It's super important. And we're going to go into the last segment now, which is called Politics Are All Around Us, where we talk about the world of politics around us. So the first question is, who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
A couple of names come to mind, and the things that unite them is that they're bold, visionary leaders who unified large groups of people around constructive and positive change. So names like Barack Obama and Nelson Mandela come to mind. But actually, for my official answer to this question, I would actually like to make it very real and bring it down to the most recent provincial election, where I was proud to stand forward with an absolutely brilliant cohort of Ontario Liberal candidates. On election day, I was so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with a group of candidates who were so passionate, so bright, so experienced across so many different policy domains, so personable. And unfortunately, we all know how the election went for the Ontario Liberal Party. And I truly miss those visionary candidates that I wish, had an opportunity to be here with me, because I think our province would have been incredibly stronger to have them here. And so, I would say that I'm inspired by all the candidates that I ran alongside, in May and June 2022. And as I think about the steps that I take into the future, they will be with the view towards promoting the change that they wanted to see, and working hard to make them proud every single day.
Well, definitely some great words there. And I mean, again, like we all know how it went, but it's important that everybody who was elected makes sure to bring positive change and growth forward, no matter the party, just looking at the future and looking forward and seeing how can we work together. How can you work together as a group of 124 MPPs work together to bring that inspired positive change that you see and that everybody else sees, to bring it forward to create a better Ontario. Absolutely. And we're going to go on to the last question, which is something that we've already kind of touched on, but something I like to ask anyways. And it's, what do you think is an issue that should be focused on more, that needs to be focused on more?
So forgive me, but I'm going to touch on a few things, and I'm going to take, I said earlier that, I tend to be a big picture kind of thinker. And so these are going to be slightly big picture answers. So please forgive me. The first issue that I want to bring forward is I think that we as a government really need to focus on advancing policy in an evidence-based way. We need to, to the point that you were just making earlier, we need to move beyond ideology and partisan politics and really look at what does our society need. And oftentimes it is our research and our science that, not always, but oftentimes, that informs our understanding of what our society needs. And we need to look beyond partisan politics to push forward sound policies that actually serve our people. So I would say I'm a proponent for evidence-based policy and seeing more of that in our government. I would also like to see, and have been frustrated in the past, I would like to see that when we advance policy, we don't just look at the immediate consequences of the policy, but we look at secondary and tertiary consequences. One example has been, there's been a lot of resistance implementing 10 paid sick days in Ontario. And the reason for that has been, well, it's too expensive for businesses. But the secondary consequence of not doing that, for example, is that someone has to choose between putting bread on the table or staying at home. And when forced to make that decision, if they can't put bread on the table, they wonder that they may have COVID-19 and they go to work, let's say in a factory. And they may be, the index case for an outbreak in that factory. Well, the economic consequences of that are far greater than if we had just offered them a few paid sick days in the first place. So I would like to encourage us to think more along secondary and tertiary consequences, not just the ones that we can immediately see right before us. And then finally, the two areas, one of which I've already alluded to earlier, over the last 2 years, as we rightfully focus on the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been less attention paid to important things like environment and climate change. And then I would also add to the opioid crisis. We're now in what we believe to be a seventh wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, but that ebb and flow, that we've seen in COVID, we have not seen with the opioid epidemic. The number of overdoses and the number of deaths has continued unabated and continued to increase and increase and increase, affecting every single walk of life. Urban, rural, rich, poor, everyone has been impacted by this. And so I would hope that as we move forward, and certainly I intend to, make sure that we pay, rightfully so, the appropriate attention, take aggressive action on these issues.
Well, definitely a lot of great thoughts and issues there, especially looking at obviously going away from partisanship at times to sort of look at benefiting Ontarians regardless of party ideology or points. Obviously, it's important to bringing forward. I mean, people elected you as a Liberal MPP, and the people of Don Valley East obviously wanted a Liberal voice on Queen's Park, and some people wanted NDP, some people wanted Green, some people wanted PC. But it's important that you work together regardless of that, sometimes to just share and collaborate and see what brings you together similarly. Look at your similarities beside and not just your differences at times, and especially just so many great things there. I won't go into it because we could talk for a long time about that. But that's all for today. Thank you, Adil, so much for joining me. If you like today's interview, make sure to go check out my other interview with Adil on Instagram for top 10. If you're watching this at the time of the premiere, it will be coming out on Friday. So to stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out my website, vincenzocalla.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.